get into it, and again, I don't know where you guys are with your prep, but when you start out with your GMAT prep, it's important to first get that baseline score, right? Now, you'll notice that's actually step 3 in the process here. So before you do that, because you want to take it cold, but not completely cold, you want to learn a little bit about the GMAT. Now, if you're taking TTP, we have a lot of good intro chapters that you can learn about the different types of questions on quant, on verbal, even on DI, and then do a little bit of practice. You don't have to do a ton of practice, but do enough where you feel like you have a pretty good handle on types of questions you could see on your test, and then take the practice test. Now, one of the things I say a lot is don't be intimidated by the practice test. Don't be super concerned about what that score is, because it has no effect on what your final score is going to be. So if you want to get a 685 and you score a 505, like, that is what it is. It just means that's the gap between your goal score and your current score. Same thing, if you get a 475, it doesn't matter. The point is you need that data early on, so you can't be scared to take the practice test. And then after that, obviously we talk about selecting study materials. Hopefully, you guys here are using TTP. If you're not, check it out. You'll find that it provides what you need from a study plan perspective, from a depth perspective, really everything necessary for you to really crush the GMAT. Now, study materials are one thing. I talk about this a lot. Your study schedule is another thing, and that's unique to everybody. So you could talk to 10 GMAT test takers who have taken the GMAT. There's a good possibility you're going to get different ideas of what works for them study-wise. Some people study for, 15 hours a week. Some do 20. Some study in the mornings. Some do the evenings. Some do a combination of both. Some can study on their lunch break. Some of you are in college. You can study in different times than if you're a working professional. So the point is, you got to sit down and you got to look at when you can actually study, and then you got to put pen to paper and create that schedule. Because if it's just up in the air every day of when you're going to be studying and it's not planned ahead, it's going to allow you to kind of skirt the issue. It's not going to help you stay disciplined, because you're going to have, let's say, a stressful day, and you're going to say, well, I don't want to study for the GMAT right now. You really need to treat it like your job, because if you're having a stressful day, you still got to do your job, right? So don't let that mindset change when it comes to studying for the GMAT. You got to make sure you're planning ahead. You're doing the things that you've said you do. Now, some things about getting good at GMAT math in general. And none of these should be shocking, okay? Eliminating self-talk. Well, I've worked with students who said, well, how am I going to do this on the test? I'm never going to think of that. And it's like, well, yeah, you will, because you've just learned it here, and you're going to tell yourself that you're going to do it when you get to the test. You're going to make sure you've learned it. You're going to make sure you've memorized it. So, and I'm not saying you can't have bad days when it comes to the GMAT. You will, but don't make it seem like a bad day is ever encompassing of the GMAT journey in general, right? Get over those bad days. Look to see better days. They happen. It's not always going to be bad. It's not always going to be good. So it's really how you react to those bad days that are going to, change things for you and make things work the way that they need to. Now, the other thing is outworking the competition. Again, that's pretty obvious. That's something that, in life is important, right? How hard are you willing to work, right? Versus the other people out there. And look, some people might not have to work as hard as others. That's the other thing. Like, it takes you 8 months and it takes someone 2 months, but you still get the same score and you both get into your goal programs. Like, that's what's important. So really focus on yourself, but make sure you're working hard as you possibly can be. And, in a way, kind of put the blinders on. When we say outwork the competition, it doesn't mean look at how hard the competition is working and work more. It just means work your butt off, make sure that you're doing everything possibly that you can without burning yourself out to get prepared for this GMAT. Next, growth as discomfort is growth. It is, because if you're only comfortable throughout the process, that means you're only focusing on the things that feel good. And although that's what we want to do, the problem with that is that you're not getting into your weaknesses, you're not getting into your weak areas, and obviously that can be an issue. So really focus on the things that you struggle with, and understand that that's part of the learning process, because the more weaknesses you can turn to strengths, in the end, the better off you're going to be, right? So keep that in mind and understand that it's not a bad thing to be uncomfortable. It's actually a good thing. It means you're growing. And again, everybody, if you have questions, throw them in the chat box and I can answer them as I'm going through this stuff. Timing strategies. This is important. So we talk about timing a lot. The first thing I will say, and I'm sure it's also on this PowerPoint somewhere else, when you're first dealing with GMAT questions, you really can do them untimed, because the first thing you have to do as a GMAT Quant test taker is develop accuracy, develop processes that you know will work when attacking questions, which will then build confidence. Because without confidence, what ends up happening is you'll get to test day, and all of a sudden, the things that you were doing that maybe you were successful with in your practice, you're going to stop doing because you're not going to feel confident enough. So you want to build that confidence, you want to build that accuracy, you want to build those processes. And the funny thing is, when you do that, you're actually going to become faster. And you're going to become faster without realizing it, because as our skills improve, just organically, we do things faster. And yes, eventually you have to be cognizant of the timing, but early on, allow that to happen naturally, allow it to happen organically. Now, as far as the actual GMAT is concerned, things that you can do on it, well, first part about striving for excellence and not perfection, you don't have to be perfect to get a good score. Yes, I've heard some things happening with the score algorithm where people have gotten funky scores by getting just a few questions wrong, but we still have to run under the assumption that you don't need to get every single question right on the quant section for a great score. Because the problem is, if that's what you're thinking, you're never going to give up on questions. So either way, you're going to be in a tough spot, because if you spend 10 minutes on a question in the hopes of just getting it right, well, you're guessing at the end. So that would be a lose-lose situation. And yeah, if you find that there's a lot of questions you don't understand, well, that just means you're probably not fully prepared for the GMAT. So that's a totally different situation in itself. And that goes for the first 10 questions too. Yes, we don't want to get the first 10 questions wrong, but we don't want to get them right only to our detriment, where at the end of the test we're guessing again. So these are things that you always have to be thinking about, because for every action, there's a reaction, right? If you spend 8 minutes on 2 questions, the end of the test, you're done. You're going to be guessing, probably getting stuff wrong at the end of the section, rather. So you've got to be very cognizant of that. And that's the whole idea of losing a battle to win the war. The battle is that question. If you lose that question, and you also can go back to a number of them if you have time, but the war is the section. You want to win the section, not the question itself. So you always have to have that mindset when you're going into these tests, when you're going into your practice tests, because otherwise a couple wrong moves can really be harmful for a section. And then that also goes to throwing away questions to catch up on time. I've seen this a lot. Well, I'm behind, so let me just guess, and then I'll be back where I need to. But what happens if you guess on a really easy question? Well, that doesn't help, because then that's a question that's not only going to dock you points, it's a question that you could have gotten correct. So try to organically catch up on time. One way to do it is maybe you spend less time getting to that correct answer. Let's say you're 60% sure a question is correct, or 70%. And you're like, well, I could do more work on this, but I know I need to catch up on the clock. So you throw in your answer and you keep things moving. So yeah, don't randomly guess. And another thing is, give a question 30, 45 seconds or 20 to 30 seconds, especially if you know it's one of your weak areas. Then you guess and move on. And then you say, well, this is something I probably wouldn't have gotten right anyway. So those are important things so that you're not just throwing away these questions. And the last thing, and this is killer, you've got to answer every question in the quant section. I'm sure any of you who've been anywhere on the forums, GMAT Club, Reddit, etc., have seen if you leave something blank on any section, it's killer. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 seconds and 2 questions. Guess, confirm, finish the section. Do not leave anything blank. It's going to be very, very detrimental to your score. So keep that in mind. That's super, super important. Now, some more strategies. Checking your work, never. I mean, nowadays, I don't hear too many people doing that. If you're one of them who thinks you have the time to do it, you don't. So don't even think about it, because you're going to just kill the rest of your test. You have to get used to feeling like, 80% certain that you're right in a question. It's kind of like you're just taking a jump and you're saying, well, hopefully I land where I need to. Kind of the feeling you got to get. So keep that in mind as well. The internal clock is big, obviously, because you want to know when you hit that 2-minute average. Doesn't mean you need to stop, but it means you can make a decision. It can be a decision marker where, okay, do I keep moving because I'm pretty close to an answer? Or am I, in a place where I think it's going to be another 2 to 3 minutes, and then you got to make a decision. To get that internal clock, you really do need to probably practice with a clock, a stopwatch, maybe your iPhone. Or actually, heck, get a stopwatch, because then if you have your iPhone out, you're getting messages, it's going to distract you. Like, literally go get a stopwatch, practice that way. Eventually, you'll feel what 2 minutes is like. And as far as the actual timing on the test, what I prefer to do is look at the number of questions left, multiply by 2, and then see if that matches up with the amount of time left on the timer. If I'm behind, I make strategic moves to catch up. If I'm ahead, I understand that if I get into a jam, I have that extra time. I like to call it playing with house money, right? You have the extra time banked, and you can use it. And that's why even spending or saving 10 to 20 seconds on a particular question is so helpful, because imagine you save 20 seconds on every question you do, you're going to bank time. So that stuff multiplies, and it becomes almost exponential in a way where you're going to get a lot of extra time to use and use strategically. So that's why knowing where you're at is super important. Now, strategies in general, a lot of this TTP covers, like build a strong foundation. Well, what do we do in TTP? Well, every chapter starts with the foundational skills and has you work your way up, right? And that's the course in general. So if you're following the TTP study plan, you're already in a great spot. Same with translations. We make it a big deal. In general word problems, it's all about getting those translations down, because there's so many word problems on the GMAT, especially now in the DI section. Data sufficiency is word problem based. It wasn't always like that before in the old GMAT. So your ability to take words and translate them into equations is really, really important. So keep that in mind. Of course, most of DS, data sufficiency, is math-based. So learning that along with quant is important too. It doesn't matter. It's tested in the DI section. It's something you want to learn while you're learning math, because a lot of the math skills are tested there. Obviously, some of the other things we talked about, embracing your weaknesses, that goes without saying, because if you don't embrace your weaknesses and eliminate them, they're going to continue to creep up all the way up until your actual GMAT, and then they're still going to be weak on your GMAT. So that's going to be a problem. So yes, getting your weak areas handled is important, and making sure that you're not shying away from those as you're moving through your prep. Now, another thing as a side note, the other stuff in DI, learn those at the end of your prep for sure, because of the amount of quant and verbal-based strategies that are included in them. Okay, it's very important to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to be spinning your wheels for no reason. So get the quant down, get the verbal down, then do DI, and you'll see that it's incredibly helpful to have those skills down before you even start it. More macro thoughts on studying. Starting the process early is huge. I can't tell you how many people come to us and they're like, well, I have a month or I have 6 weeks. I need a 200-point increase. And the problem is that's near impossible. So you need to give yourself the amount of time you think you need and then add 3 months to it. If you think you need 6 months, give yourself 9. Heck, you can start years early and get your GMAT done. It's worth it. I know that's not something that a lot of us have done, but if you're young enough and you have that option, I say do it. You know, the older you get, the more responsibilities you're going to have and the more things you're going to have to juggle while studying for the GMAT. So to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. And just understand that it takes a lot of time, usually more time than you think it will. That's why I suggested adding the 3 months to your prep schedule. And that way you're not jammed up trying to get things happening for first round deadlines, and then you have to switch deadlines. Same thing for second deadline. There's some people who aren't there yet. And then I say, well, you can try for third, even though it's tougher, or you just have to shift to another application cycle. So it's one of those things that the more time you give yourself, the earlier you start, the better off you're going to be for sure. And this is a tough one, but, trying to keep your stress levels reasonable while you're studying for the test is helpful. And that relates to your overall life, but also your GMAT prep stuff in general. So what that means is, although you probably will have to push things aside to study for the GMAT, don't completely shut off your life. You know what I mean? So if you are someone who engages in physical activity, continue to do that. But, maybe you need to kind of lighten the load of that because you need that time for your studying for the GMAT. So if you go to the gym 5 days a week, maybe you go 3 days, or you figure something out where you can keep up that schedule but also study for the GMAT. So it's a balance. And even the things that you do socially, while you'll probably end up doing less of them, it's not to say that you can't reward yourself for like a great week of studying, whether you're going to dinner or going to brunch, doing something fun where it's not just GMAT 24/7. Because if it is, then you got to worry about burning out. And once you burn out, it's tough to come back from that. Reaching out for help. Well, if you feel like you're struggling, there's tutors out there. There's forums that you can reach out to fellow GMAT test takers. Just don't completely isolate yourself and think that things are going to automatically get better if you're not reaching out and trying to get on track. Unfortunately, GMAT test takers do go down a path that doesn't always work. So you got to find a way out of that path and get on a path that works well for you. So keep that in mind. Just be cognizant of that as you're going through your preparation. And then that way you won't go too far into a rabbit hole before turning around and making the fixes and adjustments you need to be successful. The why is really important because, this is going to be a process, and the why helps keep you motivated and disciplined, right? So if you know why you're studying for the GMAT, you can always have that tucked away. Well, I don't feel like studying today. Well, but then again, why did I want to study for the GMAT to begin with? Well, to get into an M7 MBA program, to get a better job, to get a better career, right? That's the stuff that'll keep driving you. If you don't have a why, then maybe you realize, you know what, this isn't the time for me to take the GMAT. And this especially goes for those who are younger, who are saving the test, because in those situations, the why is a little further away than, it would be if you're, let's say applying to schools in the next 6 to 8 months. So yeah, keep that close to you so you can use it for your discipline, for your motivation, and so you know what the purpose is, why you're putting in these late hours, getting up early to study, all that stuff, because it's going to be stressful. There's going to be times you don't want to do it, but if you can continue to be disciplined, like we say here, on the days where you would rather not be studying, those are actually the days that are going to set you apart and have the most long-lasting effects on your prep. Because the good days are the good days, but if every bad day comes along and you just say, screw it, I'm not going to study, well, those are going to add up, and then eventually you're going to have to make those days up somewhere, and then that's obviously going to elongate your prep, and nobody wants that. So keep the why close. It's going to be really helpful for you. All right, this is important, comparing yourself to others. Well, not comparing yourself to others, because as I told you earlier, this process is unique. Everyone's journey is unique, right? So if somebody can study for the GMAT and be successful in 4 weeks, which is a ridiculous timeline, let's even say 6 weeks, and you see you're on month 6 and you're still going, well, that's fine, because again, you get your score and they get their score. It doesn't matter in the end. This isn't something that's going to even matter to you once you're into your goal MBA program, right? So keep that in mind and just make sure that you're not sitting around and thinking about what others are doing, even if it's a colleague, even if it's a friend, even if you're in a pre-MBA program where tons of other people are taking the GMAT. You just got to focus on yourself. Otherwise, that's going to stress you out completely. And then who knows what's going to happen to your prep. If you're stressed every day looking at what everyone else is doing, it's less focus on yourself, and it's less focus on just what you need to be doing, which is, again, focusing on your prep that day, that week, etc. So and you can talk to people, that's fine. You can use them for motivation, and heck, you can study with them, but just understand the person sitting next to you might be done with the GMAT sooner than you or longer than you, and it doesn't make your journey any less important or any less impactful. You can still get to where you need to go, even if someone else did it in a different amount of time. All right, so we talked about building a strong foundation. That's important. Walking before you run, that's exactly what it is. You get the foundations down, then you work towards the more advanced stuff. Don't just jump into hard questions, easy questions, medium questions. They're really important because if on the test you get an easy question wrong, it's going to be killer for your score. We've already seen it with people's score reports that one easy question can really knock you down significantly on the quant section. So make sure you can handle those easy questions and you can do them, with speed. That's really, really important. So yes, don't just jump into hard questions. It would be frustrating for your prep anyway. Work your way up, easy, medium, then get into hard. That's exactly how things are laid out in the TQP study plan. And I think it makes it for a much better experience of learning GMAT math. Careless mistakes, we talk about this all the time. You can't have a lot of them. Now, a lot of careless mistakes come from speeding up and just doing things quickly to do them quickly. So you need to be less concerned with that speed and more deliberate and careful with your process. And like I said, the accuracy will breed your speed. It will happen. I promise you it will happen. So focus on accuracy. There's just so many tertiary benefits to being accurate. One of them, obviously, as I said, your confidence level. As you are accurate, you will become incredibly confident with what you can do. And that's just going to help you go smoother and go faster and do things the way that they need to be done. And then you'll start avoiding careless mistakes, because if those creep into your GMAT, again, it's going to be super killer for your score. All right, we talk about algebra is really important because everything on the test, basically on the math section, includes algebra. That's why we teach it so early on in our course. You need to be good at algebraic equations, substituting, combination method. Everything related to algebra needs to be essentially second nature to you. So that way, when you get to the algebra component of a question, whether it's a rate question, whether it's a work question, a ratio, even a combinations question, you can handle the algebra that you need to. So early on in your prep, make sure you get that stuff down. It doesn't mean there aren't sometimes other ways to go about questions, but as long as you have that tool in your toolbox of dealing with algebra and setting up equations, it's going to make you that much stronger overall in GMAT Quant. So make sure you get it down. Again, in Target Test Prep, it's about our second chapter, and it's pretty simple to learn, but it's such an important skill. I can't stress that enough. All right, we all hear about the cliff notes of GMAT Prep, right? Trying to game the exam. I mean, look, the bottom line is don't try to game it. Just learn the stuff. If you know your stuff and your skills are there, you're going to do well, assuming you have the confidence you need. You're not an anxious test taker. Like, that stuff aside, if you have the knowledge, you'll get there. But it doesn't happen overnight, right? This isn't a 3-4 week process. This could be up to 6, even 8 months of work. And throughout, you got to keep things up with notes and flashcards and make sure you don't forget topics that you learned early on and stuff like that, which I'm confident, you will, but you got to just understand that it's a journey and it's a process. And that's why I mentioned starting so early so that you're not stressed out about time and admissions deadlines and things like that. But if you try to go the shortcut route, you may say, okay, 2 months are up, and then you realize you did stuff wrong, and you got to go back, restart, and then it just adds 2 months on to whatever prep time you were going to take. So it's not an overnight thing. Rome wasn't built in a day. So take that approach when you're studying for the GMAT. And if you do early on understand that that's the process, then when you're 4 or 5 months in, you're not going to be stressed out because you've actually planned for that mentally. So you're just thinking that you're doing what should have been happening. So again, don't try to game the test and do the Cliff Notes version here. Now, an error log, really important. This is kind of what I just said. When dealing with you getting stuff wrong, right, you need to understand why you're getting things wrong from a content perspective, but also from a general prep perspective. Am I making careless mistakes? Am I rushing? Am I misreading variables? Am I picking trap answers? Like, you need to understand if those are issues and you need to fix them in real time. But you have to be cognizant that the error log can get really big. So if you're not cleaning the error log up pretty regularly to get stuff out of there that you already know, it will be too big to actually review. So it's about creating the error log, using the error log, and then maintaining it. So once you're 100% set on a question, remove it, and then keep things going. So every time you look at your error log, it's not going to be this incredibly overwhelming process, because that can definitely happen. All right, so those were some thoughts. Here's some kind of things about TTP I think a lot of you guys probably know. We have a practice question of the day. It's something you can sign up for. If you want to get those in your inbox, it's something really cool I recommend doing just so you can get kind of a random question each day. We have our diagnostic. It's a nice way to get a bird's eye view of your strengths and weaknesses. It's not going to give you a score, but it is going to give you a feeling of taking a timed exam. You're going to be able to review questions, see what areas you're weak in. So it's a nice starting point for anybody starting out here. We have a score calculator if you want to check out what you need to get for your section-wise to get your total GMAT score. Something you can check out early on, because as you play with that, you can see what can happen in each individual section. So all these things are free. You can sign up for this. You can get all these free items without having a subscription to our course. Of course, if you have a subscription, you get this too. And remember, our trial is full access for 5 days. Doesn't cost any money. So if you really want to check out TTP, that's the best route to take. I know a lot of prep companies don't offer full access. We do, because we know how robust TTP is, so it's worth giving all of that for students who want to check it out for 5 days. These are just some success stories, so take a look at these. You want to see what some students have done with TTP. We've had a lot of great success with the GMAT Focus, which of course is now called the GMAT. So yeah, there's no reason why you guys can't also see similar scores. I mean, it's possible for anybody. So with that said, we have a few extra minutes where you guys can ask questions. And I see we have one. Should you be removing them as you review them? This is the error log. Yeah, I think you can actually remove questions from your error log as you're reviewing them and feeling good about them. Yes.